The June 15th Eggs and Issues Breakfast featured a discussion on local government pension plans. Speakers Mike Walsh, investment funds consultant, Joyce Shanahan, City of Ormond Beach manager, and Mike Terrell, Fire Department's union president, brought the issues to the table.
I could have retired years and years ago, but this business is the greatest business in the world. Every single day that I get up, I can't wait to see the next headline and what's going on and who did what. But just in the past 3 months, just in the past month, okay, we've had a hedge fund blow up that decided that it was the great time to buy Greek bonds, had pension fund money in it, okay? So whatever that allocation they had to that hedge fund, that's gone. We had the incredible debacle by Morgan Stanley of the Facebook offering. I don't know how many of you participated in that. It was the biggest offering IPO that we have ever had, and it was the most mismanaged by Morgan Stanley and by the NASDAQ that has ever happened. There are still people that don't know if they own this stuff or not. Okay? I know outfits that put in for 1 million shares, thinking that they were going to get 200,000 because of the allocations, because of the oversubscription allocation, thinking that they were going to get 200,000, wound up with the whole million. That's a problem. Now you know you got a problem if you got it all. Some of them were omnibus accounts that had to put those in clients' accounts. They thought it was going to come out at 38 and go to 50, and they would be distributing 12 million in profits. And now it's underwater by $11. Some people don't even know that they own this crap yet. They don't even know. Anyway, that happens. That affects pension funds because, believe me, there is Facebook in somebody's pension fund. Some separately managed account has the stuff in it. Then we hear about Jamie Dimon and J.P. Morgan's fiasco. A $2 billion fiasco. Own proprietary account, managing your own money. It's not public money, it's their own money. But here's the tell. You got a guy nicknamed the Whale operating your privately, separately managed, investment accounts in London. Now you all know the term whale as applied to Las Vegas. It's the big guy, the big fish, the big player, the loser. Okay? You got a guy by the nickname the Whale handling your money. You better be looking over your shoulder. If he's got that name, he means he's a big player. He's doing a lot of trades, and he lost $2 billion for J.P. Morgan. It wasn't just a $2 billion loss. When you put their P/E ratio times that, it's $20 billion in capital to the shareholders. Jamie Dimon should be answering to the shareholders, not the Congress. Right. The shareholders that he lost the money. So every day there's something exciting going on in the business, and it's something that's happening. Defined benefit plans have been around since the end of the Revolutionary War. That's when they first started defined benefit plans. Most of the plans, the public plans that are in private plans that are around today, have been around for at least 100 years. 100 years ago, things looked a lot different. Not as many women in the workforce, obviously, when they started these things, mostly guys. Working conditions weren't great. Healthcare benefits weren't great. The model that they designed these things around, you retired at age 65, you were dead at age 68, and they made 36 payments. Okay? Changed. Did we change the model? Not yet. Of the Fortune 1000 companies, largest 1,000 companies in the United States, 650 of them have frozen or modified their plans today. 650 of them. A lot of them recognized it 10 or 12 years ago. Defined benefit plans owe those retirees their monthly check, no matter how good the investment side does. They are. Okay. How'd you like to have Bert Reeves on your defined benefit plan and get a monthly check for the next 50 years? It's a good way to plan. And so we have a perfect storm right now in defined benefit plans. There are 3 components of the perfect storm. One of them is plan design, the benefits. The other one is the investment piece. And the third one is the experts advising these plans. All three are screwed up at once. Right now, there is a problem. We are in the storm. From the design side, they did not anticipate people living until 90 years old. Okay, it is not in the food. Okay, it's just not going to work. For the benefits side, we're giving away too many benefits. We're approving too many deals. We're approving too many disabilities. The plans can't sustain it. Okay, something has to be done. On the investment side, abysmal, terrible, horrible performance, conflicts of interest every which way in the plans. Investments, if you look at the averages, they've gone nowhere in 12 years. These plans weren't designed, they were designed for a 9 or 10% compounded. You go 0 and 20 years, you know they're in trouble, you know they're underfunded. The expert side, the advisors, the consultants, the actuaries have done a bad job, a lot of it. Not all, and not all these plans are in terrible shape. Some are at varying degrees. But the experts, you've got guys advising plans that have conflicts of interest because they or their firms are doing business with the money managers. Shouldn't be allowed. That's terrible. It should not be allowed. Okay. You have actuaries who are not telling the truth. They're simply not telling the truth. They're not telling you guys the truth. Because if they did, they'd be fired. There's no 8% return compounded. There's no 7.5. There's no 7. Okay, it's probably 5. That's one part of the problem, the actuarial problem. The other part is they haven't taken into account the longevity, how long people are going to be enjoying benefits for these plans. They haven't done it. They haven't told the truth. If you're fired, you tell the truth. You'll find somebody else who will tell you what you want to hear. So the underfunded liability is high. If you think you have a $30 million underfunded liability, if the numbers were correct, it could be $100 million. So anyway, that's the overview of where we are right now. Not a happy thing. It can be fixed. It can be fixed. There are things that can be done. Okay. Now, the next guys that are going to talk, they've got a tough job. I hate to do that. They have a tough job. They've got all of the possible tasks. And to some degree, they've got their hands tied to where they can't quite do the job. So it's going to be interesting to see their side of the story and to see what they have to say.
Thank you. Firefighter's perspective isn't much different than yours or what Mike already said. We're the same as the general public. We stand at the end of our driveway when we're picking up our trash cans or our mail, and we talk to our neighbors that may or may not have the defined benefits plan. We talk about the economy because we've watched all our net worth, go down to a 1992 level. I think is, what they're reporting now. We understand there's no free lunch. We watch the messy bit of local government at work. It's very difficult to appease everybody in all these things. And so, we know that at the end of the day, somebody's got to pay, and we want to work with that. The message that, like Mike just talked about, that resonates. That resonates with taxpayers, voters, your neighbors. They hear the same things. They watch the same news. They get the same reports. Our concerns, long-term financials like everybody else. Unfortunately for firefighters, may be good for the rest of the public. We don't have to worry about it as long. Firefighters don't live as long as everybody else. So instead of the retiring at 65 and passing away at 68, we retire at 48 and die at 53. So something in that neighborhood. So government solvency, we worry about the governments remaining solvent. We don't want to see increase in taxes. We want the cities to be able to pay their bills. We want our paychecks to cash when we go to the bank. And in most cases, cities are relatively solvent. We do financial studies each year to see where government agencies are sitting. And then honesty, the fact is we want if we're gonna counter these issues, we want people to put real numbers, no spin, numbers don't lie. Now, actuarial science is a little bit of an odd, duck, but, 2 + 2 = 4. And so if we talk about real numbers, what we're really paying, what we're really doing, and where we really are, then we believe a lot of these issues can be resolved. Next slide. Who and why? Who are we? Probably what we're going to focus mostly on here are local law plans, and those are generally affecting cities, counties, states, and are generally in FRS, Board of Retirement Systems. Federal government really have their own pension plans. FRS is pretty much fixed. There's some ongoing litigation, but we'll probably get to that later on. Local law plans, as many of them as there are, you'll see on the next slide that there's as many problems as there are plans. And our idea of why cities, counties, state, and federal government should exist are basically for 2 reasons: to provide service and to provide infrastructure for growth, for people who live their lives for society. Again, going back to the original slide, we get it. We are the general public. We're right in that group. We live next door to you. Number of local law plans and chapter plans, 175, 185 plans on public safety. There's about 353 in the state of Florida, plus FRS. So we're talking about an enormous amount of money. We're talking about an enormous amount of funding on all levels, and we're talking about a lot of people, a lot of people's lives that are affected, not just the people who contribute, not just the cities and politicians and other elected officials and city managers, everyone there, but we're also talking about the beneficiaries of these, husbands, wives, that type of stuff. So we have a lot of people affected, so there's a lot at stake. And again, as I said, as many plans that you have, as many problems. Some plans are doing better than others, some plans are doing worse than others. This is a snapshot I took off of the FRS site. This is their idea of where they were. You can see in 07, 08, there was about $130 million of actual value in that fund. They felt they were 106% of the funds necessary, and they were paying out $5.2 million, or $5.2 billion, excuse me, and that's $130 billion in there. FRS is one of the most, my understanding, is one of the most solvent funds in the country. Probably the next would be CalPERS in California. But here we are in 2011, 2012. Now we've jumped up. We're putting out almost $7 billion a year, and our market value is down to $126 billion because of the things like Mike was talking about, market fluctuations, things happening out there. And we look at, I think it's, don't hold me to this number, but we look at May of 2012, last month. I think this value is now down to $119 billion. Who's going to pay that? There was some legislation on the state level that they said everybody has to pay 3%. They take 3% out, and what do those darn people do? They go out there and file lawsuits, and they're trying to take their 3% back because they don't want to contribute. We get it. We understand the whole thing, but there are processes to go through, and I think that's where the litigation was funded. But we went from 106% funded, where we could start seeing some relief for taxpayers, voters, elected officials, and such, down to 87%, and then we know on today's value we're below that. But there is some good news. One thing I would like to point out here is if we try and look, this probably is an unnatural number, right here and right here. And I bet you this number is quite a bit higher. What happens, and I forgot your name from UCF, you talked about you just graduated a bunch of psychologists and stuff like that. You work on people's psyche. You tell them that you're going to change their plan. You tell them you're going to take away their benefits. What do? If they can, they're going to retire. And that puts undue stress on that fund. And that runs these numbers in the wrong directions. And that hurts the problem more than what happens. Well, we have to cover that cost because math is math. Next slide. So the choice of it is chapter plan. Cities have that choice. Usually when they start business, they have a choice to go into chapter plan. School boards, counties, state issues, get lumped right into FRS, and that that cost isn't figured by the cities, it's figured by the state's actuaries, and then they get stuck with that. Why do we go to chapter plans? The city's cost of the plans. Chapter plans generally cost less, although all the responsibility is borne by the cities and the members of the plans. Over time, generally, they cost less, and the cities have autonomy. They can modify those. Unlike FRS, where we turn around and mandate that the employee's gonna pay 3%, and we have no choice but to comply with that, where we don't, the city didn't have the autonomy, they take the money out, so. Am I supposed to stop or something? Next one. Market fluctuations are problems, taxes are problems, we can't keep raising taxes, we pay too much taxes already. Bubbles, pick your choice of bubbles. We have Europe on the horizon, as Mike, was bringing up, and diminishing net worth. If we're all worth less, we want to pay less. Change the background on this slide here because we're talking about old news, minimum contributions. Some of the things that firefighters see are cities generally make the minimum contribution necessary. Well, if you have a credit card, you pay the minimum payment, it's going to take a long time to pay that card off, and there's your unfunded liability. Why do we never get it paid down? Well, we always pay the minimum amount. Market fluctuations, firefighters don't really have much control over that, but we're aware of it. Actuarial assumptions, Mike said it, a lot of them are wrong because we're always looking backwards at these and we don't project forwards, and then we come in wrong assumptions. Mixed priorities, a lot of times we don't focus on just that unfunded liability. Other things get mixed in there. We have complacency. We knew 2 years ago that we had bad market returns, and we didn't do anything those 2 years. We're talking about it today. Kind of still figuring lag. So old news, as Governor Christie said. Next one is, are we here? This is an actuary's report. It says they don't really feel the funds are where everyone thinks they are. That it has less to do with how the funds are and how much funded they are versus do the entities that have the responsibility have the ability to pay, and that's what it comes down to. You can pay your mortgage, does it really matter that your house is underwater? I think is the thing. Next slide. Short-term fixes, service reduction. We can stop providing some of these services, save money, transfer that money over, pay off unfunded liabilities. We can go with personnel reductions, limit the number of people that you pay pensions for. We certainly don't like that one, but we know it's there. Again, we get it. Benefit reductions, we can do that, but remember that most of the people that are costing the money are already retired. And so unless we're going to talk about insolvency, we're stuck. We need to establish our priorities. If it is paying off the unfunded liability, paying them down.
Of your personal retirement. Years ago, we thought it was personal savings, Social Security, and your employer pension plan. 33% of each of those, but now it's turned out that the employer pension plan is a much larger part of that option. We see we're giving bigger and better benefits. Next slide. In Florida, Mike covered this a little bit, there's 185 cities that participate in the Florida State Plan. It's operated by the state. The benefits and the contributions are determined by the state, and recent legislation by the state required folks to contribute 3% to that plan. That's now in the Supreme Court. 206 cities have their own plan, and we're going to talk a little bit here today about Ormond Beach, Port Orange, DeLand, and Daytona. They have their own city plans. Next slide, please. Essentially, there's two different types of plans, and Mike covered this a little bit. Public versus private. Public plans are what they call defined benefit. You get a fixed benefit for the rest of your life, and the sponsor of the plan, in this case the city, carries all the risk of that. In the private sector, it's a defined contribution. They're generally voluntary participation. You contribute X amount of dollars, and your employer contributes X amount of dollars, and you bear the risk of that plan. The employee bears the risk, but they gain all the reward of that plan. Lots of other information. You'll have to look at that. You can go into things. This is really where the rubber hits the road. Unfunded actuarially accrued liability. This is the present value of the future benefits of the plan and how many assets you have to cover those. For example, in 2011, this is from the comprehensive annual financial reports of these communities, DeLand had a combined unfunded liability of $5.6 million. Daytona Beach, $56 million. New Smyrna Beach, $9.2 million. Ormond Beach, $12.1 million. And Port Orange, $21 million. Next slide. That means that that's my future nut that I have to pay off. I have to pay those dollars off in the future. One of the key components, and Mike touched on this a little bit, are employee contributions and the rate those employees contribute to the plan. If you're in the private sector, you might pay 5% and your employee matches 5%. Doesn't work that way in local government. The contribution rate for police officers in DeLand is 7.5%, fire 5%. Daytona Beach 9.9%, New Smyrna 8.7% for police, 1% for fire. Ormond Beach 9% for police, 8.4% for fire. Port Orange 7.5% to 8% for police, 1/2 of 1% for fire. That's what they contribute to their retirement. Which nets in dollars. For example, Port Orange firefighters pay $12,000, $12,500 for their contributions to the plan each year. Next slide. Employee contributions. These have increased 158% over the last 5 years for employers. For DeLand, last year they paid $1.1 million into the plan. Daytona Beach, $7.8 million. New Smyrna, $1.5 million. Ormond Beach, $1.5 million. And for Port Orange, this is $4.6 million. This is only police and fire. We also have general employee plans. Those are a bit different. I just kind of focused on police and fire. But as you can see, this trend line, this is unsustainable for local government. We cannot continue to put all these assets of our organization into just retirement. Next slide. Funded ratio. This is really what the key is. This is what we saw in the paper a couple of, maybe November. The Leroy Collins Institute came out with a grading plan that said that A plans were those that had 90% funded rate or above, and they were considered well-funded and sustainable. B grade plans were considered generally stable but need review, and those were 80 to 90% funded. C plans were 70 to 80% funded and needed more and careful monitoring. D plans may require corrective action. May is probably not a good word, because I think it shall. As you can see, these plans are all below 100% funding, and most are below 75. DeLand got a B grade for their police and fire last year. Daytona Beach got a B grade for police and fire. Daytona Beach is a little bit different. They have a combination plan. All the other local governments have separate plans. New Smyrna Beach got an A for their police. They're 94% funded. They got a D for their fire. They're 58% funded. Ormond Beach got 2 Ds. 52% funded for police and 62% funded for fire. Port Orange, F grade. They're 42% funded for fire and 42% funded for police and 53% funded for fire. Next slide. These are sustainability. It's a tough choice for local governments. What do we do from here? You have to change one or two parts of the equation, either the funding side or the cost side. One of the things that Mike alluded to was the assumed rate of return. Both of Mike alluded to that. Foster & Foster is an actuary for probably 2/3 of the fire and police plans in the state of Florida. And they have assumed an actuarially rate of assumption of 8% that the plans would earn. Well, I can tell you the last 5 years we haven't earned that. In Ormond Beach last year, our assumed rate of return, we dropped it from 8% to 7.5%, which is a good thing. But what that means is I have to put more money into the plan because I'm expecting less earnings. But my actual earnings last year in police were 1% and fire was 1.3%. The other thing you have to think about are the expenditure sides of the equation. Part of these assumptions when you're valuing the plans moving forward is, are you anticipating the growth in employee salaries correctly? If you're not, that can add additional unfunded liability. Are you anticipating correctly the growth rate of inflation? If you're not, that can add to the cost of the plan. Mortality, how long do these people live? Up until last year, the city of Ormond Beach, not unlike most localities in the state of Florida, we were using mortality tables from 1983. That's what the actuary gave us to use. I mean, we didn't question that. Most local plans haven't questioned that. We just changed that, I think, to the 2002 tables. The other thing we have to talk about is plan benefits. What is the retirement age? Should people retire 20 years and out? In my city, firefighters and police officers can go 20 years and out. General employees can't go before 65, I believe, or if they have years of service and are a minimum of 55 to get 85, that magic number. So retirement age has a lot to do with it. Multiplier, that is what you times your annual salary by. In Ormond, it's 3.5%, I mean 3.3% for fire. For general employees, it's 2.5%. For state employees, general employees, it's 1.67. Final average compensation, this is a big issue. This determines when you leave the city, they look at your highest 5 years of the last 15 of your employment. But if you have sick and vacation leave and you're paid out for that when you go, that's added into your final average compensation. So that increases that, so you have a greater obligation. Some plans have fixed COLAs in them. The city of Ormond Beach doesn't have that for our plans, but there are some plans that have automatic COLAs, and that is the single most expensive item in a plan, is an automatic COLA. I don't have any answers for you, but I just wanted to put the facts on the table and give you an idea of where this is going. We in Ormond Beach have been struggling with this for several years since Fred was mayor. The other part of the equation is that we have to negotiate these changes with our unions. All our employees are unionized, police, fire in general, and we have to negotiate those changes. So it's been a difficult and arduous task, and we're still ongoing in that, and we're looking at benefit levels going forward. We are restricted somewhat by the state about what we can do to police and fire plans. We receive money from the state it's called premium tax money. It's a tax that you pay on your auto insurance and your fire insurance, and that money is set aside in a separate fund. And the state gives it back to the local governments that have local law or chapter plans that we can only use that money to fund those benefits. The problem was in 1999, the state froze that number, and they said any growth in that number, those monies had to be used for extra benefits for police and firefighters. So many of our chapter plans in the state increased their multipliers from 2.5% to 3%. So as you can see, those costs just continue to go up. Again, I don't have the answers. These are all individual based on your community standards, what your community can afford, and what your community can support.